So this is a video going through 2018 paper 2 question 7 part D and E. And part 1 of D asks me to find the mean number of sunshine hours for June in Valencia between 2001 and 2010. So I want to calculate the mean. So the first thing I should do is make a note of my formula. And effectively here, although they've presented it in a table, really they're giving me a list of the sunshine hours for each year. So I'm going to say x bar equals summation x over n. So all this means is I'll add up my data and divide by how many pieces of data I have. And the way that I like to present this is to present it as summation x, which just refers to what I get when I add them all up, n, which just refers to the number of pieces of data, and then I finally calculate x bar by dividing. So summation x this time, when I add all of these guys up, is going to be 1818. And I've got 10 entries, 10 pieces of data, and then I simply say 1818 divided by 10 for my mean, which is 181.8. And it's just important that I include my units. So in this case, it was hours of sunshine, so 181.8 hours. Part 2 of the question asks me to identify the years in which the sunshine was within 5% of the mean. And the first thing just to note here is the different ways in which they can ask this. And one way is to request there's a tolerance of plus or minus 5% of the mean. So really what this means is I want to have a look at my mean and I want to bring it down by 5% and I want to bring it up by 5%, and then I want to identify the years that fall into that particular range. So I want to take 5% off the mean and add 5% onto the mean as well. So when I look at my current mean, I can consider that to be 100%. So if I take 5% off, I'm down to 95%. And of course, I can calculate this by just taking my mean and multiplying it by 95%. And so when I work that out, it's 172.71. And then I also want to go 5% above the mean. So I'm going 5% up from my mean. I'm going to think about that mean as being 100% starting off. If I go up 5%, I'm up to 105%. And I can get 105% of my mean by just multiplying it by 105%. And when I work that out, it's 190.89 hours. And now all I have to do is just go through my table and identify the years in which I was between 172.71 and 190.89. So the first one doesn't fall into that range, neither does the second one. The third one does. The fourth one does. The fifth one does as well. And then this guy's too big. He's over 190.89. He's too small. He's too small. He's too big. And he's too big. So it's just these 3 years where I'm between 5% below and 5% above the mean. And I want to give my answer as the years, so 2003, 2004, 2005. So part E of the question then asks me to find the standard deviation of the rainfall. And it's just important when you're looking at this table not to confuse it with a frequency table. So I've covered over the sunshine hours here because they're not relevant at all when I'm working out the rainfall standard deviation. Now there is a formula for standard deviation, but actually you can see even when you look at the exam papers, the space given for the answer is really small and the formula takes up quite a bit of space. So really what they're doing here is they're prompting you to use your calculator. Now I only have the newer version of the Casio, so I'll demonstrate how to do it using the newer version of the Casio, and I'll have a look then online and see can I find an example of an older Casio make being used to do a similar type of calculation, and I'll put a note on that up on Teams. So regardless of what you're doing anyway, whichever calculator you're using, the first thing you should always do is clear your data before you do a calculation, and that's the same on both types. So shift 9 3 equals an AC, and this will also solve a lot of problems that you might encounter on your Casio calculator generally. So the next thing then is that I want to use the statistics function to enter my variables. Now, sometimes you will need to include frequency, so it's probably no harm to have the frequency turned on. So to do that, I'm going to press Shift menu and then arrow down and 1 statistics and 1 to turn on my frequency. And so now there'll be a frequency column in any table that I create. Once I've that done then, I'm going to press my menu and I'm going to choose statistics from my menu here, and it's 1 for 1 variable. And you can see now in my table that I've got a space for my variables and a space for my frequency. So I'm going to enter my variables. So they are, in this case, 72 is the first one. So I'm going to type in 72 equals And then my next one is 133. So I'm going to type in 133 equals. And you can see that each time I press equals, the frequency actually pops up over here automatically as 1. So now where was I? So 155 equals 101 equals 94 equals 47 equals 149 equals 134 equals 94 equals 84 equals. It's quite a long table, so what you'll find is that if you want to go back up to check your values, you may have to arrow up or down through it. Okay, once you've got your table put in, and again this is the same on either calculator, you can press AC. It'll look like the information is gone, but it's not. It's being stored in the memory of the calculator. And now I want to do my calculation. So on this newer calculator, I'm going to press the option button, and I want to press 2 for one variable calculations. And I actually get a big long list of all the information that I might want to reference. So I can see, for example, X bar is there at the top. It's 106.3, but I'm not being asked for that. I'm being asked in this case for my standard deviation. So sigma X, 33.4605, blah, blah, blah. And they asked me for the answer to one decimal place in this case. So I'll just round that off to 33.5. Again, don't forget to include your units. So millimetres, just to make sure that you don't lose a mark as a result of that. And there's no need to show any extra workings because they're going to work on the basis that you've used your calculator for this calculation. So like I said, I'll have a peek online, see what I can find for the old Casio calculator, and I'll stick up a note of that in Teams. Okay?